So welcome back. Since we're a bit short in time, we try to keep everything on time, otherwise we have to start the next hours. The next presenter is Marta. I forgot your last name. Tere, exactly. So, yes.
Okay, my name is Marta Terre, and my contribution to the project was to implement the feasibility of the epidemiological model proposed by World Management. And what I'm going to do today in this presentation is to get the conclusions of all the work packages, put them together, and to use these conclusions to determine the feasibility of a case study in Catalonia. So, just to explain you, Catalonia is a region in the northeast of Spain. It's divided in 4 provinces. One of them is named Girona. The province of Girona is also geographically divided into different comarcas. These are the comarcas in Girona. And what choose this region to do a case study of GMOs and non-GMOs? This region was used because in the different comarcas, people was cultivating maize, GMO and maize non-GMO. So it was a scenario where different types of corn was cultivated. Just to know a little bit what regions, which comarcas were using GMOs or no GMOs in Girona, what we did is a survey in the different comarcas here. The farms usually in this area has an average of 100 cows, and they produce around 30 kilos of milk per day. What we were asking in these surveys, we were asking about the ingredients composition of the ration. The ration of a dairy cow is made of forages and grains. We asked about the forage varieties and the reasons why farmers were using these forages. And we also were asking about the grains, the type of grains they were using, the energy and the protein sources they were mainly used in the ration of the dairy cows. And we also asked to the farmers if they were concerned or not about the origin of these grains. Here we have the results. This is the percentage of each forage used by the survey farms in the different comarcas. Here we have the different comarcas. And the main forages used in these dairy farms were corn silage, ryegrass silage, alfalfa hay, and alfalfa silage. Here we have the percentage in each comarca. The percentage, the sum of those percentages is not 100 because in most of the farms were using more than one forage. But we can see that corn silage, it was used in 52% of the farm as an average. Then we were asking about the varieties of these corns that people were cultivating. We are talking about corns that are cultivated to do forages to feed dairy cows. So here we have a list of the different varieties. Here we have the list of non-GMOs in the different comarcas. And here we have the list of GMOs in the different comarcas. And what we observed was that in the comarca of Baix Empordà, some farmers were cultivating non-GMOs, and some other farms were cultivating GMOs varieties. In the other comarcas, Garrotxa, Gironès, and the others, they only using non-GMOs varieties. So the scenario of Baix Empordà, what is probably was a nice scenario to study and to compare farms using non-GMOs and GMOs to feed dairy cattle. When we were asking about the reasons to use this type of varieties, they answered because of the productivity of these seeds, and also because they were the ones that raised well in the area. Regarding the concentrate, the grains that they were fed to dairy cows, we have the energy sources that are made of cereals. When we were asking about the type of cereal they were using, most of the farms were using corn or high mosted corn in different forms. Only 2 use barley and only 1 use wheat as a main energy source. And when we were asking about the protein source, most of the farms were using soybean, only 3 canola, and only 1 sunflower. When we look the origin of the corn in the farms in Catalonia, here we have a list of the four provinces of Catalonia, and in Lleida, most of and here we have the map of the GMOs that are cultivated in Catalonia. So we have in green is all the areas that are cultivating GMOs. So here we have Girona, and here we have Lleida. This region also cultivated a lot of GMOs. So the corn that arrived to the feed manufacturing plant can come from this area, and part of this corn will be GMO. But also in Catalonia, there is an import. We also import corn in Catalonia, and here we have the main origin of the corn that is imported. 67% of the corn imported to Catalonia comes from France, 90% from Serbia, 7% from Ukraine, 7% from Romania. And when we look the type of corn these countries are cultivating, we observe that France, Serbia, Ukraine, Hungary, and Denmark, GMO is not permitted, and only it's permitted in Romania. So the corn imported in Catalonia, it mainly comes from non-GMO sources. But in contrast, when we look at the origin of the soybean in Catalonia, we do not cultivate soybean, but it's the main protein source used in dairy cows' diet. And when we look at the origin of the import soybean, we observe that 78% comes from Brazil, 12% from the United States, 5% Canada, and 4% in Paraguay. And in these countries, they cultivated GMO, and they cultivated more than 90% of the GMOs cultivated in this country comes from a GMO seed. So probably most of the soybean that dairy cows eat in Catalonia comes from a GMO source. When we're asking about if farmers were worried about the origin of the food comes from a GMO or no GMO, they were not worried at all. All answered that they were not worried about the origin of the feeds that the animals were eating. Here we have a scheme of the maize route along the feed production. We have that the farmer, they cultivated the corn in the field, then it goes to the drying place, then goes to the wholesaler carriers and the feed manufacturer. And here in the wholesalers or in the feed manufacturer, the imported grain enters to the chain, and it's mixed with the national corn. And then the feed manufacturers does the feed, the compound feed, and goes to the farm. In each of these route of these places, it's needed to implement some documentation is required. In the field, the farmer has to say to the administration what they are cultivating, the numbers of kilos they produce, the number of hectares they were used to produce that feed, where they are going to sell the feed and the maize variety. Then when they transport these cereals to the drying place, they also need the information of the transport, an identification number, the origin, the region, the country, and it was a GMO or a no GMO variety. So this information arrives to the drying place. It goes to the wholesalers. Also, they need also this information, identification number, farm kilos, and it was a GMO or a non-GMO variety. And here we have that the imported grain arrives to the feed manufacturer, and it's mixed with all this information. Here, the imported grain will also know the origin, the product description, the weight, and if it's a GMO or a non-GMO. But in the manufactured plants, everything is mixed, and then it comes out a feed compound that also needs in the label. They also it's required this information, but they only need to put the information if it's a GMO, if it contains or not GMOs ingredient, but not the proportion of its GMOs that it contains. And then it goes to the farm. So at the end of the farm, we don't really know the amount of GMOs those animals are consuming. This information was made from World Package 2. So the question is it possible to know how much GMO feeds consume a daily cow? No, with the actual traceability system. Yes, some changes in the traceability system occurs. Just put in the label the percentage of GMO or no GMO that exists. The ingredients variety and the amount of GMOs and non-GMOs that contains that compound feed. We also, to implement a case study, we also need to know the points where the actual surveillance system can act. And we have in a dairy farm, we have the visit of private vets that they do regular visit to the farms, and they also take samples of those farms when some diseases occur to detect infection disease. And they also send these samples to the diagnostic to the labs to do the diagnostic. Also, the surveillance system exists at the abattoir level because when a dairy cow is caught, it's sent to the slaughterhouse, and this animal goes through the surveillance system of the slaughterhouse, of the abattoir, and the veterinaries, they look that animals, and they also can detect any problem of those animals. We also have in a dairy farm individual monthly milk records and samples of this milk. So if any day any health risk exists and it could be detected in the milk, it could be used these samples to detect problems. We also have daily milk samples from the milk tank, the dairy industry, when they go to collect the milk from farm to farm. They also take samples, so these samples could be used that these blood samples are used now from the sanitation campaigns to detect brucellosis, tuberculosis, enterococcus, and pleuropneumonia, but also could be used to detect any other things that could be considered interesting for a post-marketing GMO monitoring system. And also in the farms exists the random efficient inspection control farm done by the veterinary services, where they check hygiene rules, farm documents and registers, animal sanitary inspections, control animal feed staff, and farmers formation. And in these random efficient inspection controls, they also could be implemented any other configuration that could be used to monitor, to do a post-monitoring, a post-marketing monitoring system. But the other partners of the project have always difficulties to identify health risk indicators of feeding GMOs and non-GMOs feed. And here are the conclusions of World Package 1 when they raised this conclusion, and from this conclusion, we was obtained that it was not easy to implement a monitoring system based on a determined health indicators. So I can read this conclusion. They say that published data on the health of animals consuming GM crops did not give rise to concern about the effects of GM feeds on livestock health, as most short-term, long-term, and multi-generational studies conclude that animal health is not adversely affected by feeding GM feeds. They said also that the relationship between animal health and GM feed consumption is lacking, and knowledge that would facilitate the monitoring of potential effects of GM feeds on animal health is still missing. Also from World Package 3, that they work in several case studies, from the allergenicity case, they conclude that the impact of genetic modification on the intrinsic allergenicity may be limited compared to other factors. And from the case study of World Package 3 related to horizontal gene transfer case, they also conclude that the unintended plant-to-bacteria transport will be a rare event and unlikely to pose health concerns. So, just a summary of the possibility to implement or to do a case study in the region in Catalonia. So in Catalonia, we have the 10 plants that were using GM forage from GMO and non-GMO origin. But what happens is that the concentrate all the concentrate contains soybean. So, and soybean, most of the soybean that arrive comes from a GMO source. So it's the first problem that we find is the difficulty to identify the amount of GMO feed that a daily cow is consuming. Also, from the concentrate part, we will have that the farmers produce these cereals in the field. They give the information to the feed manufacturer plant, or they use directly the maize, the corn silage directly in the dairy farm. Here they know the forage varieties and the quantity of GMO, but here in the feed manufacturer plant, what it goes in, they know exactly if it contains or not GMO, but the thing that they goes out, they don't know the mix of cereals, the variety of cereals of the final compound feed, and they don't know the GMO cereals quantity. Also, we have here the different surveillance systems that exist nowadays in the farm, and that they could potentially be used if one day a post-monitoring surveillance system related to GMOs want to be implemented. But the problem is that we need to have this health indicator to really implement a monitoring system, or to do a case study just comparing those farms that were using GMOs or no GMOs.
Very good. Thank you so much. Any questions for Martha? Anybody is willing to ask any questions? Hi.
Thank you, Marta, for your nice presentation. You said quantitatively we do not have sufficient information on how much the animals eat GMs. I understand it. What about the various varieties of GMs? Is it just one type of GM? Is it what? Is it insect resistant or what?
Yes, it's only the insect resistant variety of corn. Yes, only. But the problem is the soybean is not produced in Catalonia, but it comes from the importation from Brazil or from Canada. And these varieties of GMO are produced in other countries, but are consumed in Catalonia. So they exist in the diet. They are not cultivated, but they are used.
Just a short question, if I may. Would you foresee in the future that quantification will be possible in Catalonia with respect to GM feed?
It could be quantification, but we have to think about if it's interesting to know the importance of doing that. I think it's an effort for the feed companies just to define the quantity of GMO that they are that they are using in that compound feed. So it's a big effort, it's an economical effort for those companies. So we have to think about the value of identifying the amount of feed, the GMO that contains that compound feed or not. It's money, yeah, I think it's.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We have some time now for policy recommendations from the project MARLON partners. So I guess it's you.
Hey. Sorry for that. Sorry for that. Okay, so this is about policy recommendations. Actually, this is a kind of summary of overview of the conclusions and recommendations in the various reports, internal reports published within the MARLON project, as well as some presentations given recently. So some of these recommendations may actually sound more like conclusions, but they will highlight certain research gaps or further needs for research. For instance, of course, it's already been referred to several times. So these recommendations are not really carved in stone here, but if you have certain feedback that we could use, it's always very welcome. Maybe we can also come back to that in later discussions. So, we've several times referred to the fact that previous studies, particularly ones that are controlled studies, with a small cohort of animals under controlled conditions, like livestock feeding studies. We've noticed that there were no health impacts reported, but usually these are performance studies done with what we call first generation of GM crops, for which we actually have found no differences in the compositional analysis, for instance, or with no known impacts on nutrient bioavailability. But what my colleagues actually concluded is also to measure health-related parameters besides these performance parameters would be very useful for, say, studying GM feed impact on health. If this were to be investigated, if this were considered to be an issue. Many of the studies have also been performed in laboratory rodents. But besides that, we need for validated animal models, like livestock animals, besides these rodents, given also the big variety, of course, in livestock animals. There's a need for good design of studies, of course, and in the frame of the 3 R's, the reduction, replacement, refinement, it would also be good to look for potential adequate ex vivo in vitro systems for those animal studies. And I'm happy that we're having actually the coordinators with Grace and GTVIS with us, because, for instance, Grace actually works on alternatives for animal feeding studies. And of course, when checking the monitoring activities, the existing monitoring activities do not focus on GM feed related effects. It's already hard to find any surveillance and monitoring focusing on feed related effects, let alone GM feed related effects. Okay. So if we are to further explore into more detail GM feed related health effects, these are recommendations for how to set up controlled studies, and also say certainly monitoring activities in this particular area. When it comes to detection of GM crops in feed, I think for approved crops, for those that have been approved in Europe, of course, detection methods should have been provided by the companies to the European Commission. So current methods are adequate, but we might need to rely on new technologies for unapproved crops. Of course, when we deal with the issue that post-market monitoring may be required for, say, approvals, unapproved crops is not an issue, but unapproved crops, of course, may be useful to know what else is present in your feed. This particularly relates to things like low-level presence or adverse stress, particularly when a crop is approved elsewhere. Sampling points for detection. So this is all detection, of course, for the purpose of estimating exposure of an animal to GM feed. So we identified a number of sampling points in a chain where you could actually sample the materials, like the raw material, primary ingredients used for feed production, and the formulated feed. So I think that covers the feed production chain at certain suitable points. There are traceability data that could be used for consumption measurement, but yet there's a certain lack of details. And I think that's particularly important when it comes to, for instance, what we've already discussed, for instance, the specific GMO event, for instance, or, when it comes to, tracing back to specific animals, specific farms at a certain point. But I guess my colleagues have already, discussed this point in their own case study. For the issue of potential health indicators, We identified two scenarios in which we could actually identify potential health indicators for monitoring. Those were the case studies I mentioned. Two of these case studies pertain to mycotoxins. And when we talk of mycotoxins, I think that there's some literature out there on, for instance, aflatoxin being reduced in BT maize as a secondary effect. And their parameters are weight gain and, of course, milk production related to correlating with the presence of the aflatoxin in feed, also in milk. So this is a metabolite of the aflatoxin passed on to the milk. It's actually a food issue. And then the nutritionally enhanced crops, so we have the phytase crops. So phytase is an enzyme liberating phosphorus from a kind of carbohydrate that contains a lot of phosphorus, but it also acts as a kind of compound that binds essential metals. So if you have phytase, it both increases phosphorus bioavailability, but as well increases the availability of your essential metals. And so issues there are, for instance, phosphorus deficiencies, phosphorus deficiencies and locomotion. For amino acids, this is the other nutritionally improved crop considered. Amino acids may pertain to essential amino acids, which are, of course, essential for growth. Then you can measure growth performance. Okay. Let me actually clarify, what is possible within feed and food production chains. We noticed that there are initiatives there to track livestock. I think Europe is very well advanced in this area. Also keeping records, for instance, health records of animals. But depending on the species, either the individual animal or the group of animals can be followed. So this is something, it's not a recommendation, but it's something to take into account when formulating requirements. Okay, and then controls and health data. As already said, there are already surveillance systems in place, as explained by Louise and Marta, but they do not focus on GM feed related impacts. They may focus on the pesticides and other things, the more general syndrome. And we also have the issue of feed responsibility. As already explained, it's not possible to track all feeds back to specific farms, unless, of course, you may, as Mark explained, you might have the forage that is used on the same farm, for instance. And we only have rough estimates of what is actually reported as GM feed. So, as Martin already explained, you may have more than 90% of certain countries that are GM soybeans produced in the field, so it's very likely that also a very high proportion of the imported feed. But of course, we do have also other crops that may be cultivated to a more limited extent, and then may become even more important. Particularly also for specific GMOs, because this pertains to GMOs in general. But if we ask for case-specific monitoring of a GMO in feed, this will be for specific GMOs, and it will make it more cumbersome. Okay, so when it comes to the epidemiological tool, initially we had this discussion with a consortium, as I remember. So is it possible to relay any effects to the consumption of GM feed? But as explained already at various instances, there was no possibility to find a measure for the exposure of animals to GM feed. In the sense that there were some issues with the tracing of the GM feed. There were other ideas, and we hear that often from stakeholders, like, can't you actually compare those animals grown on organic farms, which actually are not allowed to have any GMO in that feed, with those of conventional farms? The problem here is that we have also other confounding factors, different husbandry practices and other factors that characteristics of farms as such that are different between these groups. So it's not only the GMO that is different, and the same also true for member states. So we have a number of member states that are very keen on keeping their countries more or less GMO industry that have certain concerns about geopolitics, whereas others would like to feel these someone that even us, country has discovered. But of course, there you have issues with different, environmental practices, farm sizes, maybe different breeds, animals, right? We're going to continue with these question. This is not really a recommendation. These are not realistic. So we actually have to proceed as we colleagues of democracy have done and Marta with with high possibilities. The focus was on risks, perhaps combine them very closely. And it's also very interesting about people that try to identify trends and change background syndromes is to use these expert representations like existing control data, etc., to get an impression of what's the background incidents of certain syndromes. I'm not sure if this will come back. Sometimes the official data may be underestimated. My colleagues also developed a database. I think it's important to have background data available. So our suggestion would be, of course, to maintain this database and to continue monitoring for any new data. Also to foster collaboration between initiatives. We know that, for instance, our German colleagues have established an initiative of a central kind of repository for, say, data from European projects of GM, safety of GM food. So, people find there is also environmental impacts of GM, so the grace, GPS, and Presto project, for instance, and perhaps it's also for us to link up with. Besides that, we've also done this feasibility study with MARLON. So I think they had some useful experiences with approaching experts, with requests for data. Asking them to fill out questionnaires and improve. It's very helpful, at least to one of the experts. What the questionnaire was about. They were very much willing to cooperate. On the other hand, it showed that for this purpose, the expert what it also showed is that the model could be applied along a mass chain like there's a lot of data available in the chain that's organized in the sense that certain parameters are like feet, but also health are being very well monitored and controlled already. Although not, for the purpose of monitoring the feet. Now, from the overarching perspective, we've had these various sub-projects dealing with these very specific elements of monitoring. The large picture is that within a project like this, we have been brought together two well-developed disciplines, which, you know, up to that moment have not collaborated to a great extent. Those were biosafety of GMOs and safe veterinary epidemiology. And I think it's important to further foster you know, continuing communication, collaboration, exchange between these two fields. And what's also conspicuous is that, for instance, when we started the project and when we talked to other people, other stakeholders, for instance, human biosafety experts, there were great expectations about what veterinary epidemiology could actually do. It was like, you know, you have this one example of an animal showing an adverse effect, and we could immediately then correlate this with the consumption of GM feed by this particular animal. That was actually not the case. You have to think more of, you know, the population level and changes in trends and such. And of course, also this inability that we had to link actually to actually measure exposure to GM feeds in detail. There were also suggestions we had, you know, from stakeholders actually, is, you know, because we have this brief to develop something for monitoring, which is, you know, something that's introduced in the marketplace. Actually, to have more controlled studies for its purpose. I think we had one stakeholder event where somebody actually suggested, you know, why not introducing something to an extent of damage response, or, you know, like change one variable, very well suggestion. And also, there's this suggestion to exploit existing initiatives. So we do have a lot of initiatives in the area of epidemiology. We're not really focused on it. Okay. So I realized this was a lot of, you know, conclusions and recommendations in a nutshell. I hope you're not really being overwhelmed with this. Really looking forward to your feedback, because these are not yet really carved in stone. I think what's going to happen is that, you know, going the next few weeks, we're going to write a kind of overarching report, kind of high-level executive summary of, you know, the outcomes of the work, just trying to bring them together in kind of, you know, digestible, relatively brief report, highlighting these outcomes for those people who are not able to delve into all the technical details of various, you know, sub-project reports. So we're looking really forward to any feedback you might have, maybe not now, maybe also during the panel discussions, or, you know, in the sidelines. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have some time now for questions. Perhaps you can join me here, or you can say them, but I'll just give the question in direct after the coordinator.
Sit down.
So,
I would like to.
It's working. Yes, Professor Vincent from the MLC in Borneo. You mentioned fostering collaboration between initiatives with other EU projects. Yes, definitely. How many? And is there are there also collaborations with non-EU projects? I mean, I don't know, I'm a bit skeptical and somewhat afraid when I see this multitude of projects all over the place. I'm wondering what's the concrete impact of these projects. Please bear with me, but I often say this. I mean, the number of research projects, PhD theses, master theses, action plans, roadmaps, grids, publications, books, institutions, organizations worldwide is truly astounding, very impressive. But what is less impressive is that we have made a thorough mess of this world and that no one knows what to do. So when I listen to your presentations, it's not specifically for this event. I always ask myself, what's going to be the concrete impact on tomorrow beyond intellectual entertainment?
thank you very much.
Welcome.
Just say thank you, but I think the nice thing about this project is actually that it's very applying because there's a pretty needs from, I guess, the policymakers here in Brussels that, in the event that, a post-market monitoring activity is needed, they need a tool for this purpose. So it's really for that particular purpose that we can say, okay, it's good to have the tool available. However, we realize that there's a much broader applicability of this tool, and there's still a field that might still need to be opened up. It's the field of feed-related impacts on animal health and how to monitor for those. And we see that recently the attention for the role of feed in the area of food safety and animal health and welfare is increasing. We see that organizations like FAO, Codex Alimentarius, and OSD are showing increased interest into the topic of feed. Not only because of GMOs, I think primarily because of other developments in the area of feed, including the introduction of new feed ingredients, from alternative sources. We're seeing also that existing feed ingredients, that formulation or their nature starts changing because of the switch from, food production to biofuel production. So we get, different processes, different level of attention for feed-related problems. So, when it comes to, I can't respond on the impact of every single European research project, but what I can say is that in this particular case, we had a very clear brief for a very clear purpose, but I think hopefully it will have a wider applicability. And of course, as you say, there are a lot of initiatives, in the field of veterinary immunology. We have seen a lot of projects on GMOs, including projects on GMO safety. But I think the important thing is actually to bring them together to actually raise awareness of the possibility to, combine forces and knowledge. And I think there's still a lot to do here because we have these developed fields, as you say, there's a lot being produced, but actually this is something that still might merit from further attention. And also, not just for GMPs, but also the other non-feed ingredients. So I think this is, the project has been timed from that perspective, and hopefully it will have some sort of continuation in other projects, not maybe focusing on GMP, but also maybe other non-feed.
If I may add one thing, related to the project that the Commission is holding, the projects are existing around the world. It's true, there are too many PhD theses, too many master theses, too many projects. However, it's important to communicate. But communication is really difficult to make a step forward. That's why our commissioner is also addressing the 3 O's, the open to the world, open science, and open innovation. Tend to think in Europe, and especially in academia, that we are alone against everybody else. If we don't work together, it's very difficult to produce relevant science. And as we heard today, we need the relevant science to produce relevant legislation. Otherwise, it's very difficult for those sitting in the office to guess what is needed for the outside world. Any other questions?
Do you know this question?
Yes. Well, yeah,
So I was very interested in seeing the crystal 10 contest live action. Very interested in seeing the possible examples for doing a project on mycotoxins and potential positive health effects on maybe soybeans or oil content. I think these projects lack from basic, let's say, data or or empirical availability, which would be required. For example, there's no proof that really the mycotoxins are really reduced. So first you would have to show mycotoxins are really reduced in the feed you are using, and then do additional study if there's any impact. As similar on the soybean, on the soybeans with changed oil content. So as I know, they do not play a major role in the market. So you need to really conduct a real experiment, not to just monitor. You need to conduct an experiment to provide this kind of material to certain farms. And I don't think this is the purpose of the project. And on the other hand, there are some things which are really apparently available in the market, which do not relate to potential positive effects, which you like to tend to work on, but more on potential negative health effects. For example, in Germany, there or in other European countries, you could find not only organic farmers, but also conventional farmers staying away from GM feed. You could, for example, the Danish farmers, pig farmers, you could try, or a lot of milk farmers producing non-GM milk, or not using genetically engineered soybeans, for example. So we could have groups which can be compared, same region, same kind of productivity, and you could run some investigations there. So I wonder why you're not taking these things which are much closer to availability, and maybe also much more relevant when it comes to the concerns of the consumers.
Yeah, well, I guess we had this issue here, with the recommendation of trying to be brief and focus on some main highlights. Of course, when we had, for instance, referring to this mycotoxin and the nutritionally improved crops, we of course had to think of, certain scenarios applicable to GMOs. There were actually 4 scenarios. One of them being mycotoxins and nutritionally improved crops. We had several examples of nutritionally improved crops, but these were actually the ones that, for which we could actually come to a conclusion that there is some, evidence of, health effects. May not be complete yet, but there are certain biomarkers available that you could use, or indicators that you could use for that purpose. For the other cases, we could not come to that conclusion. I didn't tell you this in detail. I didn't highlight this in detail. But for instance, we had allergenicity in farm animals, because allergenicity currently is assessed for food, but not so much for feed. Another one was horizontal gene transfer. So we did pay attention to a couple of things. We still had to stick to potential hypothetical scenarios. So the model does not, we don't say, that, it is recommended monitoring for mycotoxin just in case this is an issue. You could use these indicators as a health impact measure. But of course, those were the things we could conclude very clearly on that, in case you need to monitor those. But of course, there will always be a pre-market safety assessment, which has to be part of. So the post-market monitoring won't be any replacement for any pre-market risk assessment. Coming back to the other scenario that you mentioned, that's something that we often heard also from, the other stakeholders, like you said. But in this case, it would not be a real, kind of monitoring as foreseen. It would be more like a control or cohort study. There's nothing wrong with that, but and it's an interesting perspective. It's true, and it's often referred to. But in that case, you would work under controlled conditions, where actually you try to actually change one variable among, comparable farms. So it's an interesting thought, an interesting idea. However, our task was to develop something for the purpose of, this more generic post-market monitoring, where you don't have control of these variables in farms, where you can set up your control experiments, where you actually can monitor or follow exactly what has been fed to the animals in specific farms. But it's true that's often the alternative that people have in mind. Why not use more study. And there are examples from the food area. I think Leicester is one example where they actually introduced something like a battery blazer. They actually choose a particular time in America where they introduced it and then they started monitoring people. There are other examples, I think in Finland, where they had a time where they actually tested the impact of xylitol on dental health. So people were actually fed or actually allowed only to use food like xylitol and such. But coming back also to the issue of what you explained, this post-market monitoring of say fatty acid, chain fatty acid composition in oils. Also there was a kind of pre-market assessment and a kind of estimate, but that was of course for human consumers. If for animals it's different, but because of course the oil is primarily used for human consumption purposes. But it shows that also there the pre-market assessment is important to know whether or not monitoring, post-market monitoring would make any sense or what we need.
More questions, but there's also just to remind that there's a session after lunch, the panel session, which is really also designed for this type of discussion.
Yeah, it was multi-variety and also let's see, okay. And that was when I wanted to come back to your question about the research. So it's open, of course you should have known more about this project in detail, but when your first summary is that there is a need for more surveillance, then I think it's open to, and we'll have a lot of argument for that there is a need. But when we talk about GMO, I think it's important to emphasize that in these assessments, like we have done in UK now, they have not found any reason to believe that there are any problems. So I think this should be clearly stated. But maybe for other reasons, so that could be a need for surveillance in some way. But I think, if we say, and I can see in other areas where I worked a lot with animal welfare, but then you can say, then there is an argument now going on that we think about the consumers, but for the consumers' opinion, this is similar to the GMO area, I think, and then it would be that if some scientists, we don't know, we have to do more and more. So then, of course, the consumers say, oh yes, the scientists said that. So therefore, I think it's very clear that we have looked through all this, also in this project, as I understand from you. We haven't seen any reason to look, but there may be a reason for other purposes. But I think that should be clearly stated. Otherwise, it could be a real turning on for, yeah. It's always in all of the different opinions in EFSA, so where I've been many years, and that's always the true scientists that want to have something, we need more research and so on. So that is to promote our own job. So I think for the confidence, I think that's important to state.
No more questions here? Okay, two more questions. One here and one.
Yeah, just a small question. My name is Ivan Stief from Codaceva, and we are a veterinary reference laboratory. And what we are trying to do is to install a kind of syndromic surveillance where we have health indicators, whatever we can think of. But what is important there is that you have a kind of continuous measuring of a health indicator. And what we would like to do is just following this up in real time and just try to link that to a kind of epidemic disease of which we don't know if it's coming up, yes or no. But I think this is not of importance within syndromic surveillance. We call that a kind of unsupervised machine learning thing. So you're just following it up. And I missed a bit about here in the GMO. Maybe I completely missed it. But one of the recommendations I think is, wouldn't you recommend to follow up your GMO intake or selling or buying in or import in the real-time system Wouldn't that be a good indicator as such, and then see what's happening in your animals all over in your country? Because these are, to my opinion, there are quite some data that are already measured in real time. The data is there. You just have to look at it and try to interpret that within the context of what can we expect or what did we learn from historical data. Thank you.
I'll leave this to the expert.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. Syndrome influence is carried out in the majority of countries across the EU, and obviously there are not specific markers for testing that were available. But if you're right, if we were able to have a system which monitored for consumption data, and it needs to be more than just import data or growth data, and that's where the difficulty lies, is that actually being that it's brought into a country, it may then move up this value chain. It may be consumed at that time, it may be in the farm stores. So actually having something that is temporarily accurate is quite difficult. You're absolutely right. If we had the equivalent of the surveillance for monitoring of feed, and we have the current available system for surveillance in animal health system, putting the two together will give a much more precise information.
Just a remark, but this afternoon we're going to have a presentation by Professor von Ingram from California, and she did a study, actually, before and after the introduction of GMOs. What were the trends in, certain health parameters? May not have been syndromic surveillance, but I think more or less, chimes with what you just said. So, okay, this may not be exactly. But this will be during the afternoon session, and perhaps we can further elaborate on that during those discussions.
Okay, one last question. What's the last?
So when we are discussing post-market monitoring, we have to distinguish between general surveillance and case-specific monitoring, which hasn't been done until now in the debate, but which I think is very important to structure the discussion. So in contrast to general surveillance, which is not based on the cause-effect hypothesis, the case-specific monitoring is based on the cause-effect hypothesis. Are there or might there be some examples where a case-specific monitoring concerning feed, GM feed, might be necessary? And so then we might discuss also some methods to help to organize such a monitoring, in contrast to the general surveillance, where I think the data presented today are showing that this is not possible as a general, not cause-effect based, not based on a cause-effect hypothesis.
Well, yes, thank you very much. So, the purpose of the project was actually to develop a tool for case-specific monitoring. As you correctly noted, we have this distinction in the GMO area between general surveillance and case-specific monitoring, where you have identified already a risk in which we monitor that. I think, for instance, syndromic surveillance comes in is when we say, we have identified this potential effect, and then formulate or define a syndrome which would actually also be affected by this particular risk. We discussed mycotoxin, which obviously has an impact on growth of the animal. Now, there are many more things that can impact on growth, but it's one of these syndromes that we want to measure or that is being measured on a continuous basis. And the same can hold true for other symptoms, I think, like mortality or infections and stuff. So you have a good point there. I think the issue is that case-specific monitoring, we need to define not only the risk, but also the effects that we want to monitor for. And also, and I think that's also when, the tool comes in, because then you also have to, estimate the likelihood or the usefulness of setting up a monitoring system. You know, if this really is an effect, and also have an idea of, you know, to what the extent of the impact of syndrome is, how likely is it that you're going to pick this up using post-market monitoring? And that's also perhaps when where Mr. Ten's comments come in, because you might actually maybe decide that it's more useful to carry out maybe a control study rather than perform a post-market monitoring. So I think you have a good point here. And maybe we tend, in some of our discussions, we tend to mix up the general surveillance with the real case-specific monitoring, of course. We do see that may be an interesting development when it comes to general surveillance, that governments are setting up, adverse effect reporting systems specifically, but that's more kind of passive general surveillance, you know, when people start reporting things as soon as they suspect that something's going on. You're not really being asked on a regular basis, you know, have you, observed anything strange related to the field? You're simply waiting then for them to report. Not sure if you have to add anything to Marco.
Excellent. Then let's
Okay.
stop. Yeah, thank you so much for a very productive morning. I guess we'll have the time to discuss later on this afternoon.
Sorry. Yeah.
So we'll have the opportunity to discuss later on in the afternoon, and for the moment being, we can have a short lunch.
Yeah, one announcement, please. You will receive or you already have received in your folder a questionnaire for feedback. I want to tell you it's very important for the project to have your feedback. And please be frank and candid and open and honest with us about what you think. If you have filled in your forms, please, you can leave them, for instance, right next to the door, and they'll then be picked up by our staff. Also for our commission.
Yes, it's for the afternoon session as well. Sorry, just one more second. We reconvene at 2:15, 2:15 here, and lunch is downstairs. You go down the stairs and back on yourself, but there'll be people to show you where lunch is being served.